Hello and welcome to Diverse and Inclusive Leaders, the podcast show where I interview the most inspirational and thought-provoking leaders of today and unearth their unique stories of diversity and inclusion to help inspire, educate and motivate others to make the world a better place. Today, I'm delighted to be joined by the wonderful Dianne Greyson. Dianne has had a wealth of experience within public and private organisations. She's currently the Director of Equilibrium Mediation Consulting and also the Managing Partner of Synergised Solutions. In addition, she is founder of the Ethnicity Pay Gap Movement and is also the author of the Business Culture Review. Dan has worked for a plethora of businesses in her former career, including the likes of Thomas Cook, the Metropolitan Police Services, and also ESI Media. Welcome to the show, Dianne.
Well, thank you very much for having me.
Thank you. Oh, sorry to interrupt you there. Thank you very much for joining us.
Well, it's a pleasure. It's a pleasure.
And it would be great, Dianne, just for you to share a little with our listeners about some of the current projects you've been working on at the moment and what you've been up to of late.
Oh, well, currently I'm working on a new program that I've co-created with a colleague of mine, Jacqueline Hines. Basically, we are focusing on diversity and inclusion. We feel that the market has not really done enough to shift the dial in terms of making change. So myself and my colleague have created a new program called Transforming Bias program, which really focuses on inherent bias. So inherent bias to us means that, you know, where you grow up, the school that you're in, the family that you're brought up with, they inform your decision-making processes. So it's there that we need to really look to rather than the unconscious bias angle, so we can really tackle those situations. So at the moment, we're working on going to market with that product. Also, as you said, I've recently written a book called Business Culture Review. And again, it really tackles what businesses are currently doing within their organisation with people and how they treat the people. So we're not just talking about race, we're talking about disability, we're talking about LGBTQI, and other issues that transpire. So we want to be able to challenge the negativity around that and how people are communicating with each other. So writing the book was just my way of demonstrating how I feel about it and what I think organisations should be doing about those particular issues.
How interesting. And out of curiosity, because obviously, you know, we've spoken before and I know how incredibly passionate you are about diversity and inclusion. You know, was there anything within your earlier career that really kind of made you want to go down this route, that inspired you to write the book and to obviously follow this path around diversity and inclusion and wider kind of cultural and belonging piece?
Interesting. Interesting to me because somebody's asked me that question recently and I'm going to give you exactly the same answer, which is there was two situations. One was when I was working for an organisation and basically I was the manager of the redeployment division, so I had to get people back into work who'd been redundant. One of the ladies who came to me because of the situation, she was disabled, a highly qualified individual. I put her details forward to a manager. The manager refused her because she was disabled. So I had to remind him that he has a duty of care and obviously a legal obligation to interview her. If she is suitable for the role, all you required to do is make reasonable adjustments. So he tried to kick quite aggressively, saying, no, I'm not going to interview her. No, I'm not. So I pushed back politely, of course, and said, well, you know, you do need to interview this person. This is the reason why. He did interview her, and this is a good luck story in that he rang me back and said, actually, yes, she was good, and yes, we're going to hire her. But it also made me think, you know, that is probably one of a few where that has happened, where it's a positive ending. You were going to say something.
Yeah, so I was going to say that is remarkable. I'm sure that is also not an uncommon story. Like you said, not all of these stories have positive endings. And obviously you did your best. You convinced him otherwise. How did you go about convincing him? Because I'm sure there's people who are listening in today thinking, oh, I've had a similar situation with my line manager, or I've had a similar situation with the board. And actually, you know, it's been a rather difficult conversation to have, because you've obviously pushed back politely. How did you do that to turn them around?
Well, I think, firstly, there is this thing called the Equality Act 2010, which I had to remind him of, to make sure that he was aware that it's his responsibility to do so, and also to express upon him the skills and qualification this individual had. So she was totally relevant for the position, and what he was saying was being biased. He was being biased and saying no, but because of her disability, and it was not appropriate. And I think people are quite nervous to be firm with people, and it's also about how you do it also. And this person was at a senior level. He was a lot more senior than I was, but I was prepared to stand my ground because it was the right thing to do. And I think people need to do that, and rather than say, okay, because the senior person has said no, let's go off and do their bidding, we have to push back and say, well, no, actually, let's think about this. You know, the appropriate way to behave is to make sure that you make reasonable adjustments for that individual to be able to do the things that they need to do.
That's really great to hear that you did that, because I think it's a hard thing to do often for people to actually have the courage to stand up and have those brave conversations, even though it might be very difficult for them internally, because it is still quite a taboo subject. And I think there isn't perhaps enough education around diversity and inclusion, and also not only the benefits, but you know, the rationale behind why we ought to be educating ourselves more on it. And as you rightly pointed out, you know, diversity and inclusion doesn't just mean race, it doesn't just mean LGBTQ+. You know, there's a whole plethora of things which are in there, including disability, you know, mental health even, you know, or you know, kind of socioeconomic background,
yes.
per se.
Yeah, exactly. And I think people need to realise, diversity and inclusion is about people. But if you group us all together, what have we got in common? You know, is we're all human beings. You know, we have to treat people equally and fairly. And if we go back in this vein, then we get better results. If we start saying, oh, this, you know, this section of the world is not good, and this section of the world are weak, or whatever, clearly there's going to be problems. We've got to be, you know, united and behave appropriately, because we wouldn't, you know, I wouldn't want somebody to treat me unfairly because of my race, and equally somebody with a disability doesn't want to be treated unfairly because of their disability. And you know, it is quite clear cut, but clearly people want to make it seem like it's a challenge. It's not a challenge. Just open your eyes and the reality will come forward, I would say.
Absolutely. And you're completely right there with us all being human beings. I think it's the softer side sometimes of you know, of diversity and inclusion that needs to be highlighted, because of course, you know, with the Equalities Act and the various different facets of the protected characteristics, I do sometimes think that it's a little bit glossed over. And so actually talking about some of the softer sides, that actually, like you say, you know, we are all humans at the end of the day, and it is about being able to get on for the best of everyone, really.
Yeah.
You know, is important, you know, so that people don't feel like it is just, you know, well, the book's being thrown at them because of various laws and legislations, but also, like you say, you know, we are humans, we want to get on, we want to work in an environment that's actually going to be really positive and allow everyone to be able to thrive.
Yeah, and not to be seen like a tree hugger, for want of a term. You know, if you look at nature, you know, nature in its truest form, you know, everything is coexisting and they're getting along, and you know, there are no major issues, and the world is blossoming because of that integration and working together. And if we, you know, take a leaf out of that book, we should be further ahead than we are.
I completely concur. And I know that you talk about a number of these various different facets of leadership, and almost this kind of, you know, this it's like a positive ecosystem. You talk about kind of nature and the fact that we should be coexisting in harmony almost with one another. Talk to me a little bit about kind of your thoughts around leadership and some of the other elements that kind of inspired the book, because you mention in it how important it is to be emotionally intelligent, culturally intelligent. And I think, these are really interesting points to perhaps discuss.
I mean, leadership, I think, is of course, very important position to have. But you should be respecting your leadership. So you shouldn't be a tyrant and being pushy and actioning people to do things without acknowledging what it's going to take them to be able to do the things that you're requiring them to do. Have some understanding around the people who you're employing. Be aware that there are cultural differences in the way that you maybe speak to one may be slightly different. You might need to have a different tact to speak to somebody else. There was a case, an example. I went to see a client with my colleague, and they said that there was a manager who was scared to talk to, I think it was a Black African lady, because he was scared of what she may say to him, because he sort of misunderstood maybe her reply to something that he may have said, because of maybe the tone of it, possibly, or just the general way she speaks. But if he made an effort to understand maybe where she was coming from, that may have helped him. And the emotional intelligence aspect is that be considerate of others. People might be having mental health challenges that you're not aware of, and the only way you can be aware of it is to engage. You have to engage with your employees and understand. They're not just resources, as the title Human Resources indicates. It's not just a resource. We're individuals and there are needs. And I think the leader that can understand that and work together with the employees to be able to harness that is going to be a strong and a positive and passionate leader. It's not about just the finance. Finance, yes, is very important, but it's not just about that.
Absolutely, and it comes out in the leaves and the shoots of the trees, doesn't it, when all of this is working in unity and harmony almost, that actually, there's a huge amount of research, McKinsey reports and what have you, that actually prove the fact that having this diversity and understanding and equilibrium equals better profit as well, whilst perhaps not in the short term. Yes. It absolutely is there for the long term. And, I guess, businesses these days, I think, are becoming a lot more aware of the fact that they need to be thinking about the sustainability of their organizations, and that actually it's not all about profit. It is about the purpose and the rationale and the reasoning for wanting to work at specific businesses. So I'm with you on that. I do think the businesses that are putting purpose and people at the forefront of their organizations and not just paying lip service to it are actually going to be the ones that really will survive and thrive in the future and will attract more diverse and strong talent to their organizations.
Yeah, because people want to stay there. They want to be part of the organisation. It's when employees feel separated from the business is when discontent builds up, and they think, well, why is the employer asking me to do this and not considering my circumstances? And and I think there are a lot of bullies in leadership, which is a sad thing to say, but it's true. Evidence shows, all you have to do is open a paper, that, the way that employees are being treated these days is really quite poor. And I think leaders need to really step back and look at themselves and how they deal with people and what they're disseminating downwards to managers. What are they telling them? And what are the managers then doing? One of the things I say in my book also is that I feel that managers can be a blocker to progression within diversity, because the messages that they're getting from above are profit, 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 money, 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 but they're not getting. But don't forget about the staff. Don't forget the well-being. Don't forget to be supportive. And I think that is the challenge.
So what you're talking here about is the trickle effect almost that comes down, the messaging that comes down from above feeds down then below throughout the organisation, which can result, I suppose, in maybe negative connotations of things being purely around profit, and that actually leaders really need to take responsibility for some of the softer elements as well.
Absolutely. I think any diversity inclusion programme has to be led from the top. It's no point HR or managers suggesting it and doing it without that, because if the leaders are only seeing profit, then they're just going to say, well, that's going to cost too much. Sorry, no. Or you can do it for a little bit. Do a few managers, and then that's it. But as everybody knows within this environment, you've got to embed it from the top to the bottom, and you've got to all be seen from the same picking sheet.
And for leaders, I guess, that are listening, or for those that are tuning in to the show today, are there any kind of tools or tips or tricks that we might be able to share that could help influence the leaders into actually looking at things from a different perspective?
Don't be afraid to feel weak, feel vulnerable, because through that vulnerability you might get some understanding from others. Don't be afraid to reach out to other leaders, and that leader doesn't have to be at the same level as you. Because a leader to me doesn't have to necessarily be the leader of the organisation. It could also be the manager who's leading a team. It could be the leader of a staff network. You know what I mean? So there are different levels of leadership. Why don't you all work together and talk together and share best practice? And if you don't feel you've got the skills within your remit currently, bring it in and get everybody to share. And I think it's about sharing understanding. Don't be afraid to make a mistake, which is one that people always don't say, but it is true. Don't be afraid to make a mistake. We all make mistakes, we're human. And it's about learning. If you don't learn from mistakes, that's when you're in a problem.
I think that's such a key element there, the vulnerability piece. And it is one of those that, when I'm speaking to leaders day in, day out, and when I say leaders, I'm talking, say C-suite or the board, it's still not that much of a common thing for say a CEO, to take that as an example of the C-suite, to be showing a huge amount of vulnerability, because I think the stereo archetypal leader, in inverted commas, actually was this kind of strong, very resilient, quite hard nosed, almost type of individual that existed. And I think, in a way, it's good to see that actually this seems to be evolving significantly over time, but definitely more does need to be done, so that people can actually feel they can maybe open up and start to be vulnerable. Because by being vulnerable, I think it helps show the real side of people. Like you say, not everyone is perfect, we're all human. And so actually CEOs, or very senior individuals, showing their almost not their weaker sides, but their vulnerable sides, I think actually probably drives a huge amount more engagement throughout the organisation.
Absolutely, I agree. And I think that's probably one of the reasons why they say women make great leaders, because we're just great anyway, but because we don't mind being vulnerable. We understand that at some points we do have to do that to be able to get some learning from it, to be able to move forward. And I think we do it quite well.
Absolutely. I think that is, biology wise, we are different human beings, males and females, but I think if we can be sharing more in our natural abilities, and for women to kind of, I suppose, sometimes be standing up and actually, like you did in the example you gave, being more confident to push back, and perhaps, and again, I am generalizing here for those that are listening, thinking, well, I'm a male and I'm being, I'm not saying that at all. What I'm saying is, although a generalization, there are a lot more males who are in CEO positions. Take the FTSE 350. There are 7 female CEOs. Why is this? The stereotypical male CEO and leader is a lot more strong and less emotional, perhaps, than than women can be sometimes. And if they were to perhaps be a little more emotional, perhaps more things would transpire outwards, and we would have a different vision of a stereotypical leader in the future.
Exactly. And being emotional doesn't mean, crying all over the place. It just means about having some sense of understanding of self, and articulating that and just saying, okay, I've acknowledged that maybe I've come across in such a way. I'd like to make a change, blah, blah. So, that's what I mean. Not, crying everywhere. That is totally not the thought we're spinning here.
Absolutely, it's that self-awareness, isn't it? It's that self-awareness. Exactly. I think sometimes, if you are, the number one at the top of the tree, top of a big organisation, and it probably is quite hard to actually be able to reflect in the mirror at oneself, because really you're holding the buck and the answers for, the organisation looks to you for the answers in a way. So I guess it is to others around them to help them actually be able to self-reflect. And so I guess having that diverse team around them who is able to challenge in a positive way is going to be important.
Absolutely, I agree. Absolutely.
And you talk as well in your book a little bit about not only employee engagement, but kind of looking at the demographics of the people within organisations and different areas of socioeconomic backgrounds, etc. Talk to me a little bit about all the other areas within business that leaders ought to maybe be aware of, and why this is important that you write about in your book.
Well, you talk about the socioeconomical aspects of it. Just a small example for me. Many years ago, I worked for a IT consultancy, and the people that they would hire would always be ones who had a degree from university. I would always say, well, why does it have to be? There are people out there who don't have university degrees who are highly intelligent. It's just might be their choice, or unfortunate that they haven't gone to university. Why? They couldn't really give me a reason, but that was their earmark to prove that person was intelligent. And personally, I quite disagree with that. My mum would say something like, there are people who are educated dunces, which just refers to the fact, it doesn't matter if you go to university, it doesn't mean that you are the smartest kid on the block. And you need to be able to have a wider pool of individuals to be able to find and recruit. And equally, when they're in the organisation, are you then still chastising those who don't have university degrees, and have not got, they haven't come from a background of, financial comfort? Are you penalising them? I don't know, did you see there was a programme on BBC Two about how to work within an elite environment?
I didn't, but it sounds fascinating. Tell me about it.
Yeah, so they were basically trying to show how there are barriers for individuals because of their socio-economical environment that causes them, one, not to get a job, two, not to be promoted, three, not to be part of the elite clique. And it is evident. I've seen it within organisations I've worked for, that certain people get chastised because they are different from those who have money, if you know what I mean. So therefore they're treated differently. And why this goes on, I really don't know. But I think structurally, businesses and the environment hasn't done itself any favours, quite frankly, to enable everyone to be included and to have a slice of the pie.
Mm-hmm. And how can we try and enable this change? I know that's a rather big question to ask, because I know exactly where you're coming from. Socioeconomic background, is a bias, and there are these clusters. Really, I like your phrase there that your mother coined about educated dunces, because I'm sure we all, and people who are listening, are thinking, I must know someone like that who's
yes,
pretty high up in an organisation, and actually they're not that great. There's someone who has not got those skills, not got that piece of paper that says they have a degree, or whatever it might be, but they would be far better than that person who does. You know, what are some of the ways that we can actually start to go about alleviating this and bringing others up?
I think it's about changing the structure and thinking differently, you know, think out of the box. Because I truly don't believe somebody having a degree against somebody who doesn't have a degree, but, you know, they've got, the person who hasn't got a degree has got more intelligent, you know, both emotionally and culturally, to be able to do the job should be overlooked. And I'll just say, sorry, mother, but she had once said to me that if I don't have a degree, I'm not going to get a job. And she wasn't necessarily right about me not getting, I got a job, but once I did have a degree, I got a better job because, you know, that was the next stage of help. And I think we've just got to be open. I've been seeing more information. I can't quote the companies, but I know there were a couple of banks who said that they're no longer going to put on the job description that they're looking for people with university degrees. How long has it taken them to get to this far, really? You know, it's like when people say, "Oh, we can't find any black people to do the job." It's not that you can't find it; it's that you've not made any effort to do so. And I think it's about making an effort and recognizing to make change. You have to think about what you're doing and how you're doing it, and that means changing yourself.
Yeah, and so what you're saying also is read the structure within organisations. Actually, we need to widen the gap for the criteria that would allow people into a business or in the recruitment process or in the interview process, allowing people to succeed. And that is, you know, that is not as making it easier for people to be able to apply, but it's just about being more thorough with perhaps, you know, the interview process and including a wider pool of individuals within that, so that everyone has got an equal standing with which to be able to actually secure the job. It's not to say, hey, this person's definitely going to get the job just because they're included in the interview process. But if we don't have them included in the interview process to start with, then how would they ever be able to get the job? So
exactly. I think, you know, that there needs to be more points of entry, more opportunity for everybody to have the right to stand there and say, look, I'm good and I'm great for this job, and here's the reason why, and the decision to be made on merit. And not about anybody's biases, you know, because of education or because of what they look like. You know, we've got to stop that now, really.
We absolutely do. And the more that we talk about it and the more that we educate, the better it will be. At least this is what we're hoping anyway.
Yeah, well, put it this way. You know, we've had years and years and years of the same old thing. And now it's time for change. And what I'm hearing and seeing is more people willing to speak and say things and to try and make that change. And if we keep doing it in a unified voice, guaranteed there has to be some change. It may not be as big as we want it, but the change has to come.
Fantastic. And just moving on to another couple of quick questions. Obviously, we've talked a lot about diversity and inclusion. And for those who might be tuning into the show for the first time today, what does diversity and inclusion mean to you, Dianne?
I think, as I was saying before, it means about humanity and to be able to share and embrace everybody. You know, human rights is everybody's right. It's not a selected few. It's for everyone.
That's a great quote. Human rights is everyone's rights, and I honestly, I'm so with you on that. And just moving quickly into a little lightning round of questions. I'll give you 30 seconds to answer each one before we kind of come to the end of today's show, and I'll just summarize some of the learnings, of which there have been many from today. What's your secret being to success?
I think believing in myself. When I recognized my capabilities, I was able to really harness it and push forward. Collaborating with others has also helped. I think before, when I initially started, I wanted to go it alone and it was all about me pushing forward. Then I recognized I needed others to be able to share the experience and work together with. And I think those are quite the most important things I would say for that.
So really collaborating with others and actually sharing the burden to drive forward. And what advice would you give to your younger self, the young Dianne, if you could do now?
One of the key ones I would say is don't believe when people say that you are a failure. I think in my life, in my early life, there was a lot of negativity in my school. You know, they didn't raise me up. I felt that I was being put down, and I believed it. And it took me a while to recognize that, hold on a minute, I've got a lot to offer. And I think I would just say, you know, listen to your inner self and ignore the naysayers and believe in yourself and keep going.
That's really great advice. Really great advice. And I think it's tough when you're younger as well, because you really are far more influential almost. You're like a sponge when you're younger. You know, you suck up everything that's around you and you really believe it to be true. And so, you know, if you can break through those barriers like you clearly have, it's a good thing to be different.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
And what's authentic leadership to you?
It's about being yourself, having strong values, and just acknowledge that you are somebody who can be empowering to others and to be supportive of others. It's not only just about you. What about what you can give to others too?
So real servant leadership. I love that.
I believe that certainly is my style. I can't say for everybody else, but for me, I believe that it works. And I think the more you can give, the more you'll get back, is what I think.
Finally, second to last question actually, is there anyone who has inspired you the most throughout your career or even indeed your life?
Somebody I've mentioned before, my mother. She inspired me a lot because she showed me how to stay true to myself and also to make sure, you know, when times of trouble, to be able to hold your head up high and know that you can get through it and do the things that you want to do, I think.
Mum's the word.
Mum's the word.
Yeah.
I like that.
And finally, have you got any favourite heroes or sheroes, as I like to call them, or any books, podcasts that you're listening to, books that you're reading at the moment that you'd like to share with our listeners that you particularly enjoyed?
One of my favourites was Maya Angelou. I just thought she's amazing, absolutely amazing woman. She was very passionate. She had a lot to say, and what she said was very positive. There was never negativity around what she said, and you know, she wanted people to learn and understand people's points of view. I just loved that about her. And one of the first ever books I read cover to cover was I Know Why Cage Bird Sings, and that really touched me. And whenever I see a quote from her, I have to read it and then share it out because she's just got so much to say, and I think it's great.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much, Dianne, for being on the show today. I really appreciate it. And I really hope as well that our listeners have learned just as much as I have. Just in kind of summary, there was a couple of key points that I picked out from things that you said that I thought were really great is, leadership in your mind, as you've said, is not about being the person who directs, but it's also about being the person who understands and actually supports what others are saying and what they're trying to do. Power of vulnerability as well, which I've read some of Brené Brown's books are fantastic around the power of vulnerability. I think are really, really great. And actually that vulnerability piece is so critical to actually self-reflection that you've mentioned in today's podcast as well. Because, like you say, we are all humans at the end of the day, and we should be able to, by nature, actually exist in co-harmony. So if we can feed that through into our workforce and to the workforce of today, and also really, as you said, try and stand up for what you believe in, because it's really not an easy thing to do, especially if you're in a corporate environment or you're working with a number of different people who might be slightly different to you. Actually being the one that challenges the norm, you taught me, is actually really important to actually make that change, because it's enough now talking about it. We need to really actually inspire the action. And so let's get cracking and on with it.
Yeah, absolutely. And, people say there's, as you said, are scared of pushing back. But I do remember a couple of directors say to me that they admired the way that I presented myself, because I was fearless and professional. And that's the combination. It's about being fearless. Don't be, who you're talking to at whatever level, they're still people. So acknowledge what you're saying is correct. If you're doing something that you feel that you need to do to be able to enhance the situation, don't be afraid. Just do it, because you might have the results of somebody's interview, for example, in your hand. If somebody's rejected them because of a silly reason, you've got to stand up. If at the end of the day they say no and they push back and they squash what you said, the key thing here is that you stood up.
Absolutely, because that's the only way to inspire change. And like you said before, it's you staying true to yourself, and eventually that always does win, despite the hardship that it may feel at the time.
Absolutely, agreed.
So thank you so much for coming on the show today. Really appreciate it. It's been great to speak with you.
Yes, thank you.
And for all of our listeners, you can tune in via Apple Apple or your favorite podcast app. Search for Diverse and Inclusive Leaders. I'll put all of the show notes into online for everyone to be able to see from today's session with Dianne. Also, if you'd like to reach out to Dianne directly, you can do at dgreyson, which is dgreyson at synergisedsolutions.com. You can also find her on LinkedIn as well, but I'll put all of the details, the quotes, and her book as well, which you can get in Foyles or Amazon. I'll put all of that onto the show notes from the end of today's episode, so you can find that. If you've not managed to jot it all down today, don't worry about it at all. My name is Leila Mackenzie, and you've been listening to Diverse and Inclusive Leaders, the podcast show, with you every week, available on Apple, or you can now find us on YouTube as well under Dial Global. Visit www.dialglobal.org/podcast. Look forward to seeing you next week. Bye for now.
Thank you so much for watching the Diverse and Inclusive Leaders podcast. Please do feel free to hit the like button below, or if you'd like to receive future notifications, do ping the notification bell here at the side. If you're interested in the audio version only, you can find it on the following streaming platforms. Any extra info and descriptions will be in the links below. Look forward to seeing you soon.